we're going to work with our clay on a placemat so that we can try to keep the desk clean. You will need a bowl of slip, which is clay mixed with water, to use to add moisture to your clay when you need it, and also to use as a glue when you're binding two pieces of clay together. You'll also need a variety of clay tools that you can use to carve and write into your clay and make score marks, and also a sponge to wipe off your fingers when you need it. You also have the option to use some different texture tools to add texture to your clay, and some cookie cutters to cut out specific shapes. Now, when you first start working with your clay, it might be a little stiff and hard to work with, so what you can do is add some moisture with your slip and kind of work it into the clay. And this will make it a little bit more flexible and easy to work with. So just keep adding moisture a little bit at a time until it's a little bit easier to form and shape. Now, you don't want to add too much of the slip because then it'll start to become slimy. So just slowly add a little bit more at a time and then kind of play with the clay and work all the moisture into the clay so that it is evenly displaced within your clay. Now, once your clay is more flexible, you can start trying to form it into a sphere by patting all the different sides of your clay and trying to make it more compact. You want to try to smooth the cracks, and it doesn't have to be a perfect sphere, but you kind of want it just to be all compacted together before we start to flatten it out. So once you're finished, it should look like this. Now our next step is to turn our clay sphere into a flat slab of clay. So in order to do that, you can take your fist and just start pounding the clay a little bit, and every once in a while you just want to flip your clay over, otherwise your clay will probably get stuck to the mat. So every once in a while, flip the clay over and then flatten it out a little bit more, and you just keep repeating this process until you get the right thickness of your clay. And you want about the thickness of a pancake or a cookie. So you just keep flipping it over and flattening it out with your fist until you've gotten the correct thickness. Now your next step is to add texture to the clay, and I'm going to show you a couple different examples of what you can use to add texture and what those will look like. So we are going to start off with some burlap. Now a square of burlap can make a really awesome texture in your clay, but instead of just laying it over top, you really have to make sure that you kind of pound the burlap onto the clay to really take the full texture. So make sure that you have pressed it on your clay, and then you can pull it up and see what texture it made. The next step is to cut a shape out of the clay, and we have some cookie cutters you can use to do this if you would like. You want to make sure the sharper side is pointed down, and you just press it into your clay and then carefully pull off the excess clay. And you can set that aside to use for another shape. And then you want to gently push your clay out without messing up the texture you have already created. And then you have your first shape. Here are some other examples of cookie cutter shapes you can use, but you can also cut out your own shape by drawing it on your clay gently and then using one of your clay tools to carve it out. So it's up to you how you want to create your shapes. After you've created your first shape, you want to turn it over on the back side, the non-textured side, and carve in your initials. So you want to find a tool that's sharp, like a toothpick, to carve in your first, middle, and last initials legibly on the back of your clay. And then after you carve your 3 initials, you want to think about what class period you are in and the initial of the teacher you're working with. So R for Ruth, or P for Powers. And I'm going to write the number 3 for 3rd period as an example, and the letter R for Ruth. So your class period number and then the initial of your teacher. So my example has AJR as my initials, and then 3R for 3rd period Ruth. Create your next shape, you might be able to salvage your excess clay and just flip it over to add your second texture if there's enough space to fit your second cookie cutter. If your scraps don't have enough surface area, then you'll just have to start from the beginning and create a new slab for your second shape. So you need to add a new texture to the clay and then cut out a new shape, and you want to make sure your shape is smaller than your first shape and will fit on top of your first shape to make your ornament. Now, in order to join your 2 shapes together, there is a 2-step joining process in clay, and that's score and slip. Now, scoring is when we add marks with a tool. A fork is a really good tool to add score marks, or a toothpick, and you want to add the score marks to both shapes where they're going to be joined. So I'm adding them to the back of my Christmas tree, and I'm also going to add them to my bottom shape where I'm adding my Christmas tree. So those are my score marks, and then I'm also going to add a good amount of slip. This is going to act as the glue to bind these 2 shapes together, and the score marks kind of create teeth that join the 2 pieces of clay together. So once I've added my slip, I'm going to join my 2 pieces together, and then I want to kind of firmly press them together and without ruining the texture of my clay, and make sure that they are secure. Now, if you don't score and slip and follow those steps when you're joining 2 pieces of clay, they could easily fall apart before or during or after the firing process. You have a few different options to add detail to your clay ornament, and all these are optional. Your first option is you could add sgraffito to your ornament, which is a decoration technique where you carve into the clay. So you can choose one of your clay tools to carve in designs into your clay, and that's sgraffito. There's also stamping, where you take any object. We have these small letters that work well for stamping, and you press it into your clay, not so that it goes all the way through, but just so it creates the indentation of the object. So that's one way to get this letter outline on there. And finally, if you plan to hang your ornament with a string, you want to create a hole near the top of the ornament with one of your clay tools. When you are finished with your ornament, you want to gently pick it up and take it over to the tray specified that has your class period on it, and you want to place it on that tray and be careful not to touch anyone else's artwork. Then you want to very carefully pick up your placemat with all of your clay scraps and walk it over to the clay scraps bin and gently dump that into the bin without getting any clay on the floor.